What's going on, y'all? Terrence, the therapist here. Thank y'all for tapping in. Wanted to break this video down. This one kind of shocked me. I was super surprised just to hear about DJ Khaled actually opening up about his childhood trauma. Um, this video is very relatively short, but I feel like there's a lot of different things that he breaks down in this that I most definitely want to share with you guys. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, and yeah, we're gonna get it rocking. Let's see what he was talking about.
I really don't talk about this, but when I was around 16, 17, we had a big home invasion. My God. It was the real deal. They plotted the tie-up, the whole. My parents was home, and my sister was there,
How old was she?
like a baby.
Wow. Was anyone hurt?
No, thank God everybody was good, but it messed me up as a young kid, because, like I said, I didn't trust nobody, because I didn't know who did that. That time I started getting, like, anxiety attacks and panic attacks because I was so stressed out.
Okay, so let's break that down again. It's relatively short, but I feel like there's a lot of different things to take away from that. First of all, again, as always, when I do these videos, I want to shout out anybody who's opening up about their mental health struggles, anybody who is putting out that that information out there. Like you really don't have to, but you choose to just to I feel like a lot of people put this thing out where it's like, oh, you're just talking about your mental health just to get attention. Like, if you really been on a platform, you talk about your mental health seriously, and like how DJ Khaled's doing right here, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot to actually go through with that. So, as always, I appreciate DJ Khaled for opening up and talking about this. But I do want to break this down just a bit, right? So some of the things that DJ Khaled was experiencing was related to PTSD related symptoms. Now, PTSD stands for post traumatic stress disorder. Now, PTSD was a diagnosis that was given to primarily people that are coming back from war. This was really huge in the Vietnam War. And what they noticed was that after a traumatic experience, a lot of people had symptoms. So, a lot of the studies and a lot of foundational work that has to do with PTSD at the time was related to veterans. Now, and fast forward to today, we realize that there's so many different levels to PTSD. It's not just, you know, excluded to veterans. And it just didn't start, at during the Vietnam War. Like that's not when it started. We got into so deeply about traumatic experiences such as like generational trauma, and trauma's just been studied so much, and we realize that there's a lot of different subcultures and sub divisions of trauma. So when we talk about trauma, we have to realize like it's not just one thing. It's not just there's a whole different thing. It's complex trauma. We talk about again like generational trauma. There's so many different traumas that we have identified, and I'm glad that we've actually as a society kind of broke that down a little bit, especially in black mental health. Like when we talk about generational, we call it generational curses, but a lot of times it's like generational trauma. So we've had these spaces where we're able to do that, right? um but now, fast forwarding to today, we realize that trauma is anytime you have a emotional or psychological or sometimes even physical response after a traumatic event. Now, PTSD isn't always, a diagnosis that you give just because you have PTSD symptoms, right? So what DJ Khaled was experiencing, I heard him say two different things. One, first of all, he had a lack of trust in other people. Why? Because he didn't know who robbed him. He didn't, imagine, you know, being robbed or being tied up and, not knowing what's going to happen. And you don't really know, what's, what's really going to transpire. A lot of times we look at things from, hindsight is 2020, look at like, okay, back at the incident. But when you're in that moment, you're in shock, you're in shock. There's so many different things your mind goes through. You have the fight, flight, or freeze responses where, sometimes it's based on, your previous experience. If you experienced trauma before, you might try to fight, you might, try to run away from it, or you might freeze and not know what to do. Sometimes there is another component where you do actually maybe like comply just to not make it worse. We see that a lot of times with folks who are sexually abused, just trying to distance yourself, have cognitive dissonance, And that's pretty much where you separate yourself from reality and let the thing play out. Sometimes it's an out of body experience that you have when you do experience those type of things. So understanding too when and trauma is very, very complex. A lot of times folks may go into therapy and may think like, okay, every therapist knows how to work with somebody that dealt with trauma, but you can't do a lot of different techniques with trauma. Now again, PTSD symptoms don't mean that you've been diagnosed with PTSD, but the symptoms are real, right? So he experienced, again, going back to what I was saying before, the lack of trust. The second thing was anxiety attacks, right? So anxiety is real. Anxiety is one of those things where it is has to do a lot with your thinking and like how you're feeling. So, and it's a trauma response to certain things. So sometimes that can come in the form of nightmares, intrusive thoughts. Sometimes it could come in the form of you know um ruminating a lot, kind of maybe playing that situation over and over in your head. Like sometimes self-blaming. Sometimes it comes in the form of you know trying to figure out what actually was going on, right? So with this video in specifically, I'm glad that he talked about it because, you know, when we do have those certain symptoms or we have those things that we talk about, we don't always recognize like, you know, we don't always recognize what PTSD actually is. Sometimes we look at things and we may see PTSD as like just one thing, but it's a whole slur of different things. So I want to again thank DJ Khaled for actually going through with this and actually talking about it because yeah, it's a real thing. I hope that he got the help that he deserved and like he worked through his trust issues. But even though this video is so short, I wanted to identify those two things with you guys because sometimes we may have gone through a situation or a circumstance or whatever it is, and we may not think like it's trauma, but it is trauma, right? Now, don't go and diagnose yourself with PTSD. You obviously don't look at the video and be like, hey, like I saw Terrence, a therapist on YouTube, and he said I had PTSD. I'm not saying that at all. You need to go and see somebody professionally. Don't go to a life coach and get diagnosed with PTSD. Go to somebody who's licensed in mental health practitioners, such as a therapist, psychologist. Sometimes nurse practitioners may be qualified to do that as well. To go to a doctor, somebody that can actually diagnose you with PTSD. Now, again, just because you have the symptoms don't mean that you have PTSD. Um, but again, thank you, DJ Khaled, for sharing this with us. I hope this was helpful just with what inside of what trauma actually is versus like what you may thought it was. Again, go to somebody's professional to get properly diagnosed. If you feel like you do have symptoms, just don't take my word for it because again, there's a whole criteria, there's a whole assessment that needs to be done before you can diagnose yourself with PTSD. I appreciate y'all for tapping in. Thank you again, Terrence, the therapist. Y'all take care. Peace.